Hello, this is Jeff Williams, Chief Coach for Bizstarters.com. Not only are we nationally known for our business startup coaching and training, but each year we counsel many existing small business owners on the best growth strategies. Our topic today is a strategy that can be used very successfully by a lot of different kinds of companies, and that is partnering. Let me review what I'm going to discuss in today's presentation. First of all, I'll give you some insight on how to decide if you're ready to seek a partner. Then I'll show you some ways to go about finding an appropriate partner who can help you achieve the results you desire. And lastly, I will talk to you from first-hand experience on how to manage a partnership. Now, in between these three informational sections, I'm going to weave three partnering examples from my own experience. One was highly successful, one was not so successful, and one is brand new. So let's get started. All right, how do you know if you're ready to seek a partner? There are four key characteristics that I've discovered from doing this for 25 years that help to define whether you are in fact ready to seek a partner. First is that you should be well into the process of establishing yourself as an expert in some particular topic. In my case, my expertise has been centered for most of my 25 years in business on helping boomers start businesses and then grow them. This has taken me a sustained effort over many years to build myself as a nationally known expert in this area. I started by becoming an expert in one particular topic in the Chicago area, and that resulted in my first very successful partnership, which I'll talk about in just a couple minutes. The second characteristic is that you should be clear on the key thing that you are selling. If you don't know what it is you want help selling more of, you're going to have a real problem finding the right partner. So you need to be very clear. In my case, I have consistently been looking for access to greater numbers of boomer individuals who have a strong entrepreneurial interest and looking for sources of more and more of these from outside partners. The third characteristic is really kind of a mental shift. You put a lot of time and effort into planning and launching your business, and you really are pushing hard there for the first couple of years. You very naturally are thinking, boy, I did this all myself, and now I want the reward. And in fact, you deserve the reward. But in partnerships, you have to understand that quite often you are trading some of the revenue that you can produce for a lead stream, someone who can provide you with more prospective customers than you can do on your own. And you've got to be prepared mentally to do this, because the only way a partnership works successfully is if it's a win-win for both you and your partner. And then lastly, you should be very clear on your strengths and your weaknesses. For example, I've long known that I don't really like to do sales prospecting. Even though I've been in sales for a lot of my 40-some-year career, I never really liked cold call selling. I never really liked prospecting. I prefer to get in front of somebody who's been identified as a good prospect and give them a number of benefits for working with me and convince them that this is the right thing for them. So I knew this is something that I'm less than totally strong with, and as a result, when I look for partners, one of the first things I'm looking for is how successful are they in generating a stream of prospective customers. Okay, let's move on to our second characteristic of being ready to partner. Let me share with you my first partnering experience, which fortunately for me turned out to be quite successful and really boosted my company's growth, really rocketed it forward. My first partner was the Workforce Board of Northern Cook County, which happens to be a nonprofit partner. And I mention this because you will discover that you can successfully work with both for-profit and nonprofit partners to help grow your company. Let me use a standard structure for describing this partnership. I'll use this for all three examples that are in this presentation. What was my expert status that helped me to attract this partner? Well, it turned out that in the late 1980s, there was a state of Illinois grant fund put together to allow community colleges to put in place business startup training programs. It was a relatively new area of training for colleges, and they were all very interested in doing it. Well, I heard about this through a friend and approached a couple community colleges in the Chicago area, and they were very happy to hear that I had the expertise they needed because it was part of their grant application. They had to be able to show that they had a qualified vendor to deliver the training, or they couldn't get the money for the grant. So the word got around. I eventually ended up providing training for 10 different community colleges, and word got out pretty quickly that there was this company run by myself that had this expertise. Some of the managers on the workforce board, which was based in Park Ridge, Illinois at the time, heard about it, and they contacted me and said, we'd like to talk. So I made an appointment to go see them. When I arrived for the appointment and we started to talk, I discovered that here was the basic deal in this partnership. They had the opportunity to go after what is known as a demonstration grant. These are usually grants that have a smaller dollar amount. They're for a limited period of time, typically 3 to 4 months. And then if you do well with that, then the government who provides the grant funding will give you a full year grant. So their offer was that I would write the application for the grant, something I had never done before, but I knew I could figure out. And if they got the demonstration grant, my company would be the vendor. All right, now what was the leverage in this deal? What really made this thing boost my company? Well, it turned out that being a nonprofit, they really weren't driven by money. This is something different from for-profit partners. What they wanted was public acclaim. They wanted awards. And in 1993, I'm pleased to report that we won a national award for the excellence of our program. And that certainly gave them what they wanted. What I wanted was a continuous stream of qualified prospects, which they provided. Unfortunately, in the 1990s, there seemed to be a continuous stream of layoffs of middle and upper middle managers throughout the Chicago area, but particularly in the northwest suburbs where this agency was located. And as a result, virtually every laid off manager who was in that geographical area came through this agency at one time or another for some kind of help. And as a result, there was this continuous stream, thousands and thousands of people over a 10-year period. Now, what was the result of this partnership? Well, I'm very pleased to report that I earned over $350,000 via a series of annual contracts. And that really boosted my company. I was kind of bumping along, doing okay, and this shot me into the next level of performance for my company. Now, why did this partnership work well? Well, first of all, we were doing work that was very new in the marketplace. We pioneered this type of work among nonprofit workforce boards in the state of Illinois. We were the only one for a long time, and I think they may have continued to be the only one. This gave them a lot of prestige from being a pioneer. They gave me great autonomy as long as I delivered the program's success. Now, I had to go before their board once a year, and I had to explain what our results had been. I had to describe how we were going to improve it for the next year. So I was on the hot seat, at least once a year, but they were quite pleased with the program and were more than happy to continue us. Eventually, the government funding was reduced and then eventually eliminated, which is why the program went away. So this is an important learning point here, and that is that every partnership has a beginning point and an ending point. They do not last forever. All right, let me discuss how to find the right partner. There are a variety of methods here, and some of them can be uniquely connected to your personality or to your connections. That's the beautiful thing here. There's no one perfect way to do it, but let me share with you a number of ways that I've used to identify partners or to attract partners. The first is to use publicity and social media to attract prospects. This is part of that process of establishing yourself as an expert. If you write frequently enough about important topics in your niche and you provide advice and how-to type of information, before too long, people are going to start to say, hey, that guy is a guy or a woman is an expert. And that's certainly what I did. In my case, there was no social media when I started in the late 80s. There was no internet, no email. Matter of fact, fax machines were relatively new in 1988, but there was publicity. There was reporters and freelance writers and various people who wanted to write about the topic that I knew quite a bit about, and that was, how will the boomers transition into some kind of entrepreneurial lifestyle? So a number of prospective partners have come to me and continue to come to me through publicity and now social media. I blog frequently. I have a LinkedIn group, especially for boomer entrepreneurs, and there's a number of different ways I differentiate myself. Number two is to use referrals. When I'm looking for a certain kind of partner, I ask around widely. I ask around through people I know through the Chamber of Commerce. I talk to personal contacts. I talk to people I know from college. I talk to just a bunch of different people, and I say, do you know anybody, any company that does the following thing? And most of the time, the people I'm talking to don't know anybody. But it only takes a couple minutes to ask. It's no expense involved, so you ask and sometimes you receive. Number three is if you know who you're looking to hook up with as a partner, then you need to find out all you can about them. And some really good ways to do this is, first of all, to check out whether they've said anything in a press release about a specific project, product, or need. And one of the best places to do this is a website called PR Web. They not only provide a service for small business owners like myself to send out press stories, but they publish them on an archive. And you can go in through a search tool and put in some descriptions of what you're looking for, and all those press stories will pop up. Because you want a prospect that is also an expert in what they do. You want somebody who's got some profile in the niche that you want to be in. You don't probably not going to find a really successful partnership with a company that nobody knows. So if they are a leader, then they're going to be talking about their leadership status. You also can certainly find out by going into Google. There may be Google News stories about them. There might have been a comment by somebody else, or you can certainly find their company website and spend an hour or so surfing around the site and see if they say anything on their website about new projects. Because quite often, the way into the front door, so to speak, with a much larger partner, a large corporate partner, is you need to understand one very specific need they have and be prepared to go to them and say, I understand you have this need. You've spoken about it publicly. I think that my company can do a superlative job of helping you solve this need, and we both can benefit from this. That's a very important way to start with a partner. Okay, next, you need to be very clear on what you can offer and what you want a partner to offer. You should be able to write this down on a piece of paper before you go out trying to find a partner. Because quite often, when another organization or company knows that you might be interested in partnering, the first thing that their management's going to say to you is, what do you want us to do? And you got to be prepared. You don't want to be hemming and hawing and saying, well, I don't know, I'll get back to you on that. And then lastly, this is the process that requires patience. As I like to say, you have to kiss many frogs before you find a prince. This may be true in dating and love. It's also true in finding a partner. So don't get impatient. The good news is that you can do a lot of partner prospecting via the internet, via email. You can use Skype. You can use online resources. It's relatively inexpensive and pretty quick today to come up with a list of potential prospects. All right, let's look at my second partnership. Uh, this was with an organization called Boom, based in England. And once again, using the organization that I used in the first partnership example, let me go through and evaluate this for you. What was my expert status that led to the partnership? Well, in this particular case, Kiplinger's Personal Finance magazine had given Bizstarters an award for being the best entrepreneurial web guide. And this article was widely read. And I got a lot of email traffic from the article. But one particular was from this marketing group in the UK. They contacted me. We conversed by email a couple times, and I suggested that we look at a partnership based on what they told me through their email. Now, what was the deal in this partnership? Well, it was that I would provide proprietary intellectual property, which I'd already created and had been selling in the United States, and they would use their educational network to sell it. Now, how are we going to leverage this to make each of our organizations grow faster? Well, they claim they knew the UK market and said they had sold different kinds of training extensively. I had a proven process and coaching to sell, something that would save them a tremendous amount of time in having to develop the content and test it. Now, unfortunately, the results were not as dynamically positive as my previous partner example with the Workforce Board. I ended up only receiving their initial $5,000 IP licensing fee. Now, why didn't this partnership work as well as the previous one? Well, first of all, there were too many partners. It turned out there were 3 people trying to make a decision on the UK end as opposed to just me in the United States. And it also turned out they somewhat misrepresented their skill sets. They weren't really the right partners. I needed at least one very strong partner who had a lot of marketing experience and a lot of marketing moxie. And they had one partner who had some of that skill set, but he was only committed part of the time to our partnership. And lastly, when it got to a point after about a year or so when we were really ready to rock and roll and needed to put some more promotional money, they backed off and indicated they didn't want to put any money into it. And I certainly wasn't going to carry the full load myself. So we parted ways amicably and went about our lives. All right, let's move on to our third key consideration in partnering for profit. And that is, once you have a partnership, how do you go about managing it? Here are the tips that have worked well for me. First of all, once you have contact with a company or other organization that seems like a good fit for you as a prospect, have a face-to-face meeting as soon as possible. Now, in my case with the partner in the UK, we did it by Skype. It's important to determine if you have good chemistry. That can be more important than the dollars and cents issue in a partnership. Number 2, clearly describe what you will offer and what you expect them to contribute. It may turn out that when you present this to them during your initial meeting, they may say, no way, we're just not going to do this. And that way you don't waste any more time than is necessary. If, on the other hand, they indicate that, yes, this is very doable, this would be very attractive to us, then be ready within a short period after your meeting to send them a one-page letter of agreement. There's a number of samples on the internet you can use to model your agreement after, and be prepared to share it with them. Next, clearly lay out work responsibilities and time frames on a spreadsheet. This is the easiest way to visually see the progression. Starting from day 1. Now, at this point, you may not know exactly what date day 1 is, but you need to understand who's going to be responsible for what implementation tasks and how long should it take to do these. Next, you should have an attorney ready to provide a contract. Even if the partnership has a goal of only achieving $10,000 in income, you still need to have a contract, because the once or twice that I've done partnerships without a contract, it's come back to bite me. Number 6, use an agreed upon delivery points to discuss your progress against goal. This should be in the contract and possibly in the letter of agreement where you say, okay, on this date, say 30 days from when we start, we should have this done. We're going to have a phone call and discuss it. And then know if things aren't working right, know when to cut bait. Now, this is not always easy to do. I know I've overextended partnerships longer than I should because I'm stubborn and I don't want to admit that I may have failed in picking the partner. But you need to be able to say, okay, this is not working. Go to them and say, listen, I don't think this is going to work out for either of us. It's time to move on. Let me present my third and final client situation. And this happens to be a current partnership, and my partner is Startup.com. What was my expert status that led to this partnership? Well, Startup Nation's been around about 10 years and has developed a reputation as one of the foremost places to go for a wide variety of advice on starting and growing a small business. I read through some of their material about 6 years ago and determined that while it was really good general stuff, there was some specific tips aimed at the older boomer entrepreneur that would be beneficial. And I knew quite a bit about this because it was my niche. So I offered to start blogging for them, and I did so for 4 or 5 years. They got to see how well I wrote. They got to see how responsive I was when people sent inquiries. And generally, I got to deal with the management of the website. Now, what was the deal that has pushed this partnership forward? And that is, I am providing proprietary intellectual property to Startup Nation. In particular, a well-proven step-by-step business startup course. They will use their very large web traffic to sell the course. They have decided to redesign and re-strategize the web company after 10 years to make it more of a membership and course participation site. And once again, as was the case with my partners in the UK, I'm saving them a great deal of time in having to create the content. Now, what's the leverage that we hoped that will come about from this partnership? Well, they are very well known for providing small business advice online and have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars producing this reputation. I likewise have spent a lot of money and time developing a reputation for helping people start businesses. So we've got two experts coming together for an even more powerful product. Now, what are our results? Well, obviously, this is new. We don't know yet. We officially launch in mid-March. So check back with me in June of this year, and I'll be able to tell you better how we're doing with this partnership. We have some aggressive revenue generation goals, and I think it's quite possible. It may take a little longer than we thought to get it up and running, but I believe that it will happen. Now, what's the key for me to watch in this partnership? Well, I have to watch the concentration of the site owner, who happens to be a serial entrepreneur with a lot of projects going at one time. I have to do what I can to make sure that he stays focused on this project at least a fair amount of the time. And I also need to have an open conduit to report back to him on our success. Because he's like most entrepreneurs, the more successful something is, the more interest he has in it.